The signal came from nowhere, cutting through the usual chatter of galactic communications like a scream in the night. Ambassador Cathara of the Zephyrian Council pressed her scaled hands against the transmission console, her large eyes wide, with terror as she spoke into the recording device. "This is Ambassador Cathara speaking for the Zephyrian people. We are dying. Our worlds burn. The Devourers have returned." Her voice shook as she continued the message that would soon reach every corner of the galaxy. "They came without warning 3 cycles ago. Our strongest shields mean nothing to them. Our most powerful weapons bounce off their hulls like raindrops. We have lost 17 colonies already. Only our homeworld remains." The recording device flickered with the dying power systems of her ship. Outside the viewport, the twisted metal, remains of what used to be the proud Zephyrian Third Fleet drifted in space like broken toys. The Devourers had torn through them in minutes, learning and adapting to every weapon, every tactic, every desperate attempt to fight back. The old records speak of a species from the rim worlds, a species from a death planet called Earth. They call themselves humans. If anyone receives this message, if anyone knows how to contact them, please, we will give anything. We will do anything. We just want our children to live. The message ended abruptly as another power surge ran through the damaged ship. Cathara slumped in her chair, knowing she had just asked the impossible. The humans had been quarantined for good reason. Everyone knew the stories. 3,000 light-years away, the Galactic Council received the transmission in their crystal towers on Nexus Prime. Council Speaker Veloth listened to the message 3 times before calling an emergency session. Within hours, representatives from 200 species gathered in the Great Assembly Hall. "The Zephyrians face extinction," Veloth announced to the crowded chamber. "The ancient threat we hoped would never return has awakened. The Devourers consume everything in their path." A wave of fear rippled through the assembly. The Devourers were legend, a nightmare from the early days of galactic civilization. They were machines, some said. Others claimed they were something worse. Something that had once been alive but had given up flesh for metal and circuits. "What do we do?" asked Representative Quillax of the Trade Federation. "The Zephyrians have the most advanced military in the Council. If they cannot stop these creatures, what hope do the rest of us have?" "She mentioned the humans," whispered someone from the back of the chamber. The hall fell silent. Even speaking the name seemed dangerous. Humans were the boogeyman of galactic politics, the species too violent to be trusted with modern weapons, too unpredictable to negotiate with properly. "We cannot contact the humans," Veloth said firmly. "The quarantine exists for everyone's safety. They destroyed 3 of our ships during first contact. They claimed it was an accident, but we all saw the recordings. They fight like nothing else in the galaxy. Maybe that's what we need," suggested another voice, but it was quickly shouted down. While the council debated and argued, doing nothing as politicians always did, the distress signal continued to broadcast across space. It reached mining stations and research outposts, cargo ships and exploration vessels. Most who heard it felt sympathy but could do nothing to help. But at the edge of human space, Captain Jake Morrison was having a very different kind of day. Morrison commanded the exploration ship Liberty, a tough little vessel built for long-range surveys and first contact situations. He was a good captain, the kind who listened to his crew and made decisions based on facts rather than fear. His ship carried 47 men and women, all volunteers who had signed up to push the boundaries of human knowledge. "Captain, you need to hear this," called Communications Officer Lisa Park from her station. She was young, maybe 25, with bright eyes and the kind of enthusiasm that made dangerous jobs seem like adventures. Morrison walked over to her console, coffee mug in hand. "What do you have, Park?" "I picked up a transmission while running diagnostics on the long-range array. It's not in any human language, but the computer managed a partial translation." She looked up at him with worried eyes. "Sir, someone out there is asking for help." Morrison listened to the translated message, his expression growing more serious with each word. When it finished, he was quiet for a long moment. "How accurate is this translation?" he asked. Maybe 70%, sir. But the emotion comes through clearly. They're scared. Really scared. Chief Medical Officer Danny Rogers joined them at the communications station. He was older than most of the crew, a veteran who had seen his share of disasters and emergencies. Captain, I've been monitoring the medical channels. There are reports of entire populations just disappearing in that sector. Whatever these devourers are, they're not taking prisoners. Engineer Kate Sullivan looked up from her workstation across the bridge. Sir, if I'm reading these coordinates correctly, we're talking about billions of people, maybe more. Morrison stared out at the stars, visible through the main viewport. Somewhere out there, an entire species was dying, and they had asked for help. Not from their own government or military, but from humans. From Earth. Sir, said Tactical Officer Ryan Hayes, we're under strict orders not to cross the quarantine line. Earth Command was very clear about that. Morrison nodded slowly. The quarantine had been established after the incident with the hegemony ships. 3 alien vessels had approached Earth's solar system, demanding humanity submit to their authority. The resulting battle had lasted 6 hours and ended with all 3 alien ships destroyed and humanity labeled as too dangerous for general contact. What kind of help are they asking for? Morrison asked. Lisa Park checked her translation again. They want us to fight these devourers, sir. They think we might be able to do something their military couldn't. The bridge fell silent. Everyone understood what that meant. The aliens weren't asking for supplies or medical aid or evacuation support. They were asking humans to go to war for them. Morrison walked back to his captain's chair and sat down heavily. He thought about his orders, about the regulations that kept humanity isolated from the rest of the galaxy. He thought about the politicians, back on Earth, who made these decisions from the safety of their offices. Then he thought about billions of people dying while asking for help that only his species might be able to provide. Park, open a channel to Earth Command, he said finally. Yes, sir. Tell them we've received a distress signal and are investigating. Full report to follow. Ryan Hayes looked shocked. Sir, that's not exactly following orders. Morrison smiled, grimly. Hayes, I've been in space for 15 years. I've seen disasters and miracles, and I've learned one thing for certain. Sometimes doing the right thing means ignoring the people who tell you what's safe. He stood up and looked around, at his crew. Anyone who wants to transfer off this ship before we cross that line is free to do so, but I'm going to help those people with or without permission. Not a single person moved. All right then, Morrison said. Park, plot a course for the Zephyrian system. Sullivan, I want everything we have on defensive systems and improvised weapons. Rogers, prepare the medical bay for casualties. Hayes, start thinking like the enemy. As the Liberty turned toward the galactic core and unknown dangers, Morrison felt something he hadn't experienced in years. Purpose. Real purpose. The kind that made all the regulations and politics seem small and petty. Somewhere out there, people were dying. And for the first time in decades, humans were going to war. The Liberty dropped out of hyperspace into hell. Captain Morrison stared at the main screen in complete silence. Where 17 planets should have been spinning peacefully around their star, there was nothing but twisted metal and debris. Entire worlds had been stripped down to their cores, their surfaces peeled away like fruit skin. The metal remains drifted in space like the bones of some massive creature. My God, whispered Lisa Park from her communication station. They're all gone. Only one planet remained intact in the system. Zephyria Prime hung in space, surrounded by a flickering energy dome that pulsed with weak light. Even from this distance, Morrison could see the dome was failing. Dark spots appeared and disappeared across its surface like holes in fabric. Contact the planet, Morrison ordered. Let them know we're here. The response came immediately, full of static and desperation. The voice belonged to a female, speaking in broken English mixed with her own language. Human ship, this is Commander Thistle of Zephyria Defense Force. You actually came. We cannot believe you came. Morrison leaned forward in his chair. Commander, this is Captain Morrison of the exploration vessel Liberty. We received your distress call. What's your situation? Bad. Very bad. Our shields fail in maybe 2 days. The Devourers circle us like scavengers. They test our defenses every few hours, learning our weaknesses. Each attack is stronger than the last. Engineer Kate Sullivan checked her scanner readings. Captain, I'm picking up massive energy signatures around the planet. 17 objects, each one the size of a city. The main screen shifted to show the Devourer ships. Morrison had expected something organic, something that looked alive. Instead, he saw perfect geometric shapes that hurt to look at directly. They were black metal triangles and squares and circles, all connected by energy beams that pulsed with dark light. They moved in patterns that made no sense, folding space around themselves as they glided through the void. "They're beautiful," said Medical Officer Danny Rogers quietly. "And terrifying." "How long have they been attacking?" Morrison asked. 3 cycles now," Commander Thysell replied. "We lost our main fleet in the first assault. They adapt to everything we throw at them. Energy weapons become useless after the first shot. Missiles turn around and attack our own ships. They learn faster than we can think." Ryan Hayes studied the tactical display with growing interest. "Captain, look at their movement patterns. They're not random. There's a sequence here." Kate Sullivan nodded from her engineering station. "Hayes is right. They cycle through defensive configurations every 47 minutes. Each cycle tests a different weakness in the planetary shields." Morrison felt something click in his mind. They're following a program. A very complex program, but still just a program. "What do you mean?" asked Thysell over the communication link. "Commander, these Devourers operate like very advanced computers. They gather data, analyze it, then adapt their tactics based on what they learn. But computers can only think in ways they've been programmed to think." Lisa Park turned around, in her chair. "You're saying they can't handle true randomness?" "Exactly. They expect logical, predictable responses from their enemies. They probably have millions of different scenarios programmed into their systems, but they're all based on rational military thinking." Danny Rogers laughed grimly. "Good thing humans aren't always rational." Morrison stood up and walked to the main screen, studying the alien ships that slowly circled the dying planet. An idea was forming in his mind, the kind of crazy idea that would either save everyone or get them all killed. "Commander Thysell, I need you to listen carefully. We're going to attack those ships." The communication channel went silent for several seconds. "Captain Morrison, did I understand correctly? You wish to attack? Your ship appears to be unarmed. We have mining charges and some basic defensive systems. Plus, we have something those machines can't predict." "What is that?" Morrison smiled. "Human stupidity." He turned to his crew. "Park, I want you to scan every frequency those ships use for communication. Find their command and control signals. Sullivan, can you modify our mining charges to detonate on remote command?" "Already working on it, sir," Kate replied, her fingers flying over her console. "But Captain, mining charges aren't designed for ship-to-ship combat." "Then we'll have to get creative. Hayes, I need you to plot intercept courses for the 3 smallest enemy ships. We're going to ram them if we have to." Ryan Hayes looked shocked. "Sir, ramming those ships will probably destroy us too." "Maybe. But it will definitely surprise them." Commander Thysell's voice came over the speaker again. "Captain, please reconsider. The Zephyrian people are grateful that you came, but we cannot ask you to sacrifice yourselves for us." Morrison walked back to his captain's chair. "Commander, you didn't ask us to sacrifice ourselves, you asked us to help. This is how humans help." The first Devourer scout detected the Liberty's approach when they were still an hour out. The alien ship immediately changed course to intercept, its perfect geometry shifting and flowing like liquid metal as it adapted to meet this new threat. "Here we go," Morrison said quietly. "Park, start broadcasting every human song in our database, directly at that ship, full power on all frequencies." "Sir, that will overload our communication systems." "Do it anyway." The Liberty's speakers began blasting everything from classical music to heavy metal rock at the approaching Devourer. The alien ship slowed, its smooth movement becoming jerky and uncertain as it tried to process the chaotic noise. "It's working," Hayes reported. The ship's defensive patterns are breaking down. Kate Sullivan armed the first mining charge. Explosive ready, Captain. But we need to get within 50 meters for maximum effect. Morrison gripped his chair as the Liberty accelerated toward the massive alien ship. Then we get within 50 meters. The Devourer tried to adapt, shifting its hull configuration to present minimal target area. But humans don't follow standard attack patterns. Instead of trying to disable the ship's weapons or engines, Morrison aimed directly for its center. "Mass! Now!" he shouted. Kate triggered the mining charge just as the Liberty passed under the alien ship's belly. The explosion tore through both vessels, sending chunks of metal spinning into space. The Liberty's hull groaned and buckled, but held together. The Devourer ship simply fell apart. "One down," Morrison said, checking the damage reports. 16 to go. Commander Theisel's voice was full of amazement. "Captain Morrison, how did you destroy that ship? Our entire fleet could not damage even one of them." "Commander, those machines expect their enemies to act like soldiers. They're programmed to counter military tactics and logical strategies. But we're not soldiers. We're explorers, miners, and researchers who got really angry about bullies picking on our friends." 2 more Devourer scouts were approaching now, their movements more cautious than before. They had learned from the first ship's destruction, but they still didn't understand what they were fighting. "Park, this time I want you to broadcast human comedy shows, the stranger the better." "Comedy shows, sir. Trust me. If there's one thing the universe isn't prepared for, it's human humor." As the Liberty limped toward the next engagement, Morrison realized something important. The Devourers weren't unbeatable. They were just very, very good at fighting predictable enemies. Unfortunately for them, humans had never been predictable. The real battle was about to begin. The Liberty docked with Zephyria Prime's orbital station 3 hours after the first battle. The station was old and damaged, its metal walls scarred by weapons fire and debris impacts. Emergency lights flickered in the corridors, and the air tasted of fear and desperation. Ambassador Cathara waited for them at the airlock. She was tall and thin, with blue-scaled skin and large golden eyes that seemed to hold the weight of her dying world. When Captain Morrison stepped off his ship, she stared at him in complete silence for nearly a minute. "You are smaller than I expected," she said finally. Morrison smiled. "Most people say that. Ma'am, I'm Captain Jake Morrison. We came as soon as we could. I am Ambassador Cathara. I sent the message that brought you here." She looked past him, at his crew as they filed out of the Liberty. "There are so few of you." "We're just the first," Morrison replied. "More are coming." Danny Rogers immediately went to work treating wounded Zephyrian civilians in the station's medical bay. The alien injuries were unlike anything in human medical books, but Rogers adapted quickly. He used human antibiotics that somehow worked, Zephyrian infections, and human pain medicines that helped with alien nerve damage. "Your healer uses strange methods," observed Dr. Vesem, the station's chief medical officer. "He mixes medicine with explosive compounds." "Danny's preparing emergency medical supplies," Morrison explained. "If we have to fight on the planet's surface, medical kits that can also work as weapons might save lives." Dr. Vesem looked horrified. "You make medicine into weapons?" "We make everything into weapons when we need to." Engineer Kate Sullivan spent her time studying Zephyrian technology with a team of alien engineers. She asked questions that made them nervous and suggested improvements that violated every safety rule they knew. "This shield generator could produce 3 times more power if you removed these safety circuits," she told Chief Engineer Moltz. "But removing those circuits could cause the generator to explode. Only if you use it normally. We're not planning to use anything normally." Kate showed them how to create feedback loops in their energy systems, how to overload power cores in controlled ways, and how to turn defensive equipment into improvised bombs. The Zephyrian engineers watched with a mixture of fascination and terror. "Your people see destruction everywhere," Moltz said quietly. "We see possibilities," Kate replied. "Sometimes destruction is just another tool." Lisa Park worked with the station's communication officers to contact every human ship within range. Her messages were simple and direct. People were dying, Help was needed, and anyone who wanted to make a difference should come quickly. The responses came slowly at first, then faster as word spread through human space. Cargo ships, research vessels, mining platforms, and even a few passenger liners changed course and headed for Zephyrian space. None were military ships, but all were crewed by humans who couldn't ignore a cry for help. Commander Thistle joined Morrison in the station's main conference room to plan their defense. She spread tactical displays across the table, showing Devourer ship positions and attack patterns. They probe our defenses every 6 hours, she explained. Each probe is stronger than the last. Our computers predict total shield failure in 38 hours. Morrison studied the data with Ryan Hayes. The numbers were not encouraging. 17 massive Devourer ships against 1 damaged orbital station and a handful of human vessels that weren't designed for combat. Commander, tell me about previous battles with these machines. How do other species usually fight them? Standard galactic doctrine calls for layered defensive positions, coordinated fire from multiple angles, and gradual withdrawal to prepared secondary positions. And how well does that work? Thistle's expression grew dark. It does not work. The Devourers adapt to every conventional tactic within minutes. They turn our own strategies against us. Morrison nodded thoughtfully. What if we don't use conventional tactics? What do you mean? What if instead of trying to defend this station we abandon it completely and attack their main fleet directly? The conference room fell silent. Several Zephyrian officers looked shocked at the suggestion. Captain Morrison, said Defense Coordinator Quellara, that would be suicide. Our most powerful warships could not damage even 1 Devourer vessel. Your most powerful warships were designed to fight other warships. They followed rules and procedures and tactical doctrines. The Devourers have counters for all of that. Hayes leaned forward over the tactical display. What the captain means is that we need to do something so crazy that their computers can't predict it. Like what? Asked Thistle. Morrison smiled grimly. Like using the planet itself as a weapon. He pointed to the tactical display showing Zephyria Prime. Your planet has a strong gravity field, and it's surrounded by debris from your destroyed ships. What if we lure the entire Devourer fleet into close orbit, then use your shield generators to create a massive gravity pulse? That would destroy the planet, Thistle said quietly. Maybe. Or maybe it would destroy the Devourers and leave the planet damaged but alive. Either way, it's better than letting them harvest everyone slowly. Ambassador Cathara had been silent during the discussion, but now she spoke. You would risk everything to save us? Ma'am, sometimes risking everything is the only way to save anything. The debate continued for hours. Zephyrian military doctrine called for careful planning, detailed analysis, and gradual escalation of force. Human military doctrine, as far as the aliens could tell, called for hitting the enemy with whatever was available and hoping for the best. Your species approaches warfare like a natural disaster, observed Thistle. Unpredictable, destructive, and impossible to prepare for. That's probably the nicest thing anyone's ever said about human tactics, Morrison replied. The decision came when long-range sensors detected the Devourer fleet beginning to move. All 17 ships were taking positions for a final assault on the planet. They would attack in 6 hours, and this time they would not stop until every living thing on Zephyria Prime was dead. We're out of time for debate, Morrison announced. Anyone who wants to evacuate civilians can use our ships to get them to safety. Anyone who wants to fight can stay and help us turn this planet into the galaxy's biggest mousetrap. To his surprise, not a single Zephyrian chose to evacuate. This is our world, Cathara said simply. If it dies, we die with it. But if your plan works, if we can destroy these monsters, then maybe other worlds will be safe. Kate Sullivan was already working with Zephyrian engineers to modify the shield generators. Danny Rogers prepared medical stations throughout the orbital complex, knowing that the coming battle would produce casualties on both sides. Lisa Park continued calling for reinforcements, though she knew most human ships would arrive too late to help. Ryan Hayes studied the Devourer fleet movements and shook his head. Captain, they're not approaching randomly. There's a pattern here. They're setting up for something big. Morrison watched the enemy ships move into attack formation. Perfect geometry, flawless coordination, and overwhelming firepower. Everything. The human fleet was not. Good, he said quietly. Let them set up their perfect attack. We'll show them what happens when someone refuses to follow the rules. As the final preparations began, Morrison realized that this battle would decide more than just the fate of one planet. If humans could defeat the Devourers here, it would prove that the galaxy's greatest threats could be beaten by courage, creativity, and the willingness to take impossible risks. If they failed, two species would die together, but at least they would die fighting. The Devourers were coming, and humanity was ready to meet them. The Devourer fleet arrived like a storm made of metal and death. 17 massive ships dropped out of hyperspace in perfect formation, their geometric hulls gleaming with dark energy. Each vessel was the size of a city, bristling with weapons that could crack planets in half. They moved with mechanical precision, taking positions around Zephyria Prime like pieces on a chessboard. Captain Morrison watched from the Liberty's bridge as the enemy fleet settled into attack formation. His ship was no longer alone. 18 other human vessels had answered Lisa Park's call for help, arriving just hours before the final battle. They were an odd collection of cargo haulers, research ships, mining platforms, and passenger liners. Not one had been built for war. All human ships, this is Morrison, he said into his communicator. Remember, we're not trying to win a traditional battle here. We're trying to create enough chaos to give the planet-side teams time to complete their work. Captain Alan Brooks of the cargo ship Frontier responded first. Morrison, my ship has loading arms designed for moving heavy containers. Think they'll work on alien hull plating? Only one way to find out, Brooks. Captain Beth Coleman of the research vessel Pioneer added her voice to the channel. I've got a hold full of scientific probes. Kate Sullivan showed me how to pack them with explosives. Should be interesting. Morrison smiled grimly. This was going to be the strangest battle in galactic history. The Devourers began their attack with overwhelming force. Energy beams lanced out from their ships, each one powerful enough to destroy a moon. They expected the humans to form defensive lines to coordinate their fire, to follow some kind of military doctrine. Instead, the human fleet scattered in all directions. The Frontier accelerated directly toward the largest Devourer ship, its cargo bay doors wide open. Alan Brooks used his loading arms like giant hammers, smashing them into the alien vessel's hull while his ship spun wildly to avoid return fire. The Pioneer released a cloud of explosive probes that spread out like fireworks, each one following a different flight path. The Devourers tried to shoot them down, but there were too many targets moving in too many directions. Morrison took the Liberty on a suicide run toward 3 enemy ships at once. At the last second, he fired all his mining charges and used his ship's emergency thrusters to spin away from the explosions. The charges weren't powerful enough to destroy Devourer ships, but they created debris clouds that blocked sensors and disrupted targeting systems. This is insane, Commander Thistle said over the communication channel from the planet's surface. Your ships are attacking vessels 10 times their size. That's the idea, Morrison replied, dodging another energy beam. They can't adapt to tactics that don't make sense. The battle turned into controlled chaos. Human ships appeared and disappeared through the debris field like ghosts, hitting the Devourers from unexpected angles, and then vanishing before return fire could find them. Captain Rodriguez of the mining ship Deep Dig used his drilling equipment to bore holes in alien hulls. Captain Watson of the passenger liner Star Dreams evacuated damaged human ships, while simultaneously ramming Devourer vessels with her reinforced hull. The Devourer's perfect formation began to break apart. Individual ships started making independent decisions, trying to adapt to enemies that refused to follow any logical pattern. For the first time in their existence, the machines seemed confused. Ryan Hayes coordinated the chaos from his tactical station. Captain, the enemy fleet is losing cohesion. Their ships are getting in each other's way. Perfect. Now for Phase 2. Morrison opened a channel to Kate Sullivan, who was working frantically in the orbital station's engineering section. Kate, how much longer do you need? Give me 10 more minutes, Captain. These shield generators are more complex than I thought. You've got 5 minutes. The Devourers are starting to adapt to our tactics. Down on the planet's surface, Kate worked with a team of Zephyrian engineers to modify the planetary defense system. Instead of using the shield generators to protect the planet, they were turning them into the largest weapon ever created. This will either work perfectly or kill everyone on the planet, she muttered as she rewired the final power coupling. Those seem to be the only two options humans ever consider, replied Chief Engineer Moltzes. The turning point came when Morrison realized what the Devourers were really trying to do. They weren't just attacking randomly. They were herding the human ships into a trap, using their superior numbers to force the fleet into a killing zone. All ships, new plan, Morrison announced. Instead of running from their trap, we're going to spring it on purpose. Captain, that sounds like suicide, called Captain Brooks. Trust me. Morrison led the entire human fleet directly into the center of the Devourer formation. The alien ships immediately moved to surround them, their weapons charging for a final devastating attack. It was exactly what Morrison wanted. Kate, now would be good, he said calmly. On the planet's surface, Kate Sullivan threw the switch that turned Zephyria Prime into a weapon. The modified shield generators created a massive pulse of gravitational energy that reached out like invisible hands to grab everything in orbit. The effect was immediate and catastrophic. The Devourer ships, caught in close formation around the human fleet, were pulled toward each other by artificial gravity waves. Their perfect metal hulls crumpled like paper as they collided at incredible speeds. But the human ships, smaller and more maneuverable, rode the gravity waves like surfers on an ocean. Morrison had gambled that human pilots could adapt to changing conditions faster than Devourer computers could compensate. He was right. The Liberty spun through the chaos, using gravity pulses to accelerate and debris impacts to change direction. Around him, other human ships performed impossible maneuvers, turning the deadliest trap in galactic history into an advantage. "This is Captain Brooks," came a voice over the radio. "I just used a Devourer ship as a launching pad. I think I'm going to be sick." "That's normal," Morrison replied. "Keep flying." The battle lasted only minutes more. The Devourer fleet, designed for perfect coordination and overwhelming firepower, could not function in the gravitational chaos Kate had created. Ship after ship was destroyed by collisions, gravity shears, or simple inability to maintain formation. When the gravity pulse finally ended, only 3 Devourer vessels remained intact. They immediately began retreating, their adaptive programs apparently deciding that these particular enemies were too dangerous to fight. "Let them go," Morrison ordered as some human ships moved to pursue. "They can tell the rest of their kind what happens when you attack someone under human protection." The bridge of the Liberty fell silent as the surviving crew looked around at what they had accomplished. 17 city-sized ships reduced to scrap metal, an ancient enemy that had terrorized the galaxy for centuries, defeated by mining equipment and crazy flying. "Captain," Lisa Park said quietly. "We just won." Morrison nodded slowly. "Yes, we did. But look at the cost. 8 human ships had been destroyed in the battle. Good people, brave people who had died fighting for strangers on the other side of the galaxy. The victory felt hollow when weighed against those losses. But as reports came in from the planet's surface, Morrison began to understand what they had really accomplished. For the first time in galactic history, someone had beaten the Devourers. Not through superior technology or overwhelming numbers, but through courage, creativity, and the willingness to risk everything for others. Word of the victory was already spreading across space. Humanity had kept its promise. When desperate, aliens begged for help. The Deathworlders had come roaring in. The galaxy would never be the same. The silence after battle was deafening. Captain Morrison stood on the bridge of the Liberty, looking out at the debris field that had once been the most feared fleet in the galaxy. Twisted metal drifted through space like fallen leaves, the remains of 17 ships that had seemed unstoppable just hours before. But the victory had come with a terrible price. Zephyria Prime hung in space like a wounded animal, its surface scarred by the massive gravity weapon that had saved them all. Entire continents had shifted. Oceans had changed shape. Cities lay in ruins from earthquakes that measured beyond any scale. Damage reports coming in from the planet, Lisa Park said quietly. The gravity pulse worked, but it destroyed most of their infrastructure. Power grids, transportation systems, communication networks. All gone. Morrison nodded grimly. They had saved the Zephyrian people from extinction, but their homeworld would need decades to recover. It was the kind of choice that kept him awake at night, choosing between total destruction and devastating damage. At least they're alive to rebuild, Danny Rogers said as he treated wounded crew members in the medical bay. Dead planets don't get second chances. The human fleet had suffered losses too. 8 ships destroyed, including the cargo hauler Frontier with all hands. Captain Alan Brooks and his crew of 12 had died ramming a Devourer vessel twice their size, buying precious seconds for other ships to escape. Their sacrifice would be remembered, but that didn't make the loss easier to bear. 3 days after the battle, Ambassador Cathara requested a meeting aboard the Liberty. She came with a full diplomatic escort and a message that would change everything. Captain Morrison, she said formally, I bring greetings from the Galactic Council and an official request that humanity be granted full membership in our alliance. Morrison raised an eyebrow. 3 weeks ago, the Council wouldn't even talk to us. Now they want us as members? 3 weeks ago, the Council believed humans were too dangerous to trust with advanced weapons or interstellar politics. After watching, You defeat the Devourers, we have realized our mistake. Cathara activated a holographic display showing the Council chambers on Nexus Prime. Hundreds of alien representatives sat in their crystal towers, all watching the human captain with expressions ranging from fear to respect to desperate hope. The galaxy faces many threats that conventional thinking cannot solve, Council Speaker Veloth announced from the display. The Void Seekers in the Outer Rim, who consume entire star systems for fuel. The plague worlds that spread death through biological warfare. The machine collective that converts living beings into cybernetic slaves. Morrison listened carefully as the Council Speaker continued. For too long, we have tried to fight these enemies with traditional military tactics. We form committees, create battle plans, coordinate massive fleets, and lose every time. We need allies who think differently. You mean you need someone crazy enough to ram a city-sized ship with a cargo hauler? Morrison said dryly. Exactly. The offer came with conditions, of course. Humanity would gain access to galactic technology, trade networks, and diplomatic protection. In return, they would serve as the Council's emergency response team for threats that normal military forces couldn't handle. You want us to be the galaxy's troubleshooters, Morrison summarized. We want you to do what you did here, Cathara replied. When impossible situations arise, when conventional wisdom fails, when entire species face extinction, we want humans to come roaring in with solutions that no one else would ever consider. Morrison looked around at his crew. Kate Sullivan was already sketching improvements to Zephyrian technology, turning their reconstruction efforts into opportunities for innovation. Danny Rogers had developed new medical techniques by combining human and alien knowledge. Lisa Park was teaching Zephyrian communication officers how to coordinate chaotic battle situations. Ryan Hayes was writing tactical manuals that would make military academies across the galaxy question everything they thought they knew about warfare. There's one more thing, Veloth added. The 3 Devourer ships that escaped this battle have spread word about human capabilities throughout their network. Other ancient threats are taking notice. Some may come to test themselves against the species that defeated the Devourers. Are you warning us or asking for help? Morrison asked. Both. The decision wasn't really difficult. Humanity had spent decades isolated behind their quarantine, wondering what role they might play in the wider galaxy. Now they knew. They were the ones who solved impossible problems by refusing to accept that problems were impossible. Morrison accepted the Council's offer on behalf of Earth, though he suspected his superiors back home would have some strong opinions about his freelance diplomacy. But some decisions were too important to wait for committees and paperwork. Within hours of the announcement, human ships throughout the galaxy received new orders. Exploration vessels became rapid response units. Research stations started monitoring. Council emergency channels. Mining operations began developing dual-use technologies that could serve as both tools and weapons. The Liberty became the flagship of humanity's new role in galactic affairs. Morrison found himself promoted to admiral, though he kept his captain's chair and his crew of improvising problem solvers. 6 months later, they responded to their second crisis call. The Void Seekers had surrounded a peaceful trade world, preparing to harvest its entire population. The local defense force had fled in terror, leaving millions of civilians trapped. Morrison arrived with a fleet of human vessels that included everything from scientific research ships to garbage haulers. The battle lasted 3 hours and ended, with the Void Seekers retreating in confusion after human waste management experts turned their own hunger against them. "I don't understand how this keeps working," Commander Thistle said over the communication channel. She had joined the human fleet as a liaison officer, helping coordinate joint operations between species. "It works because we don't try to understand it," Morrison replied. "We just do what needs doing." The galaxy learned to watch for human ships arriving in impossible situations. Their presence became a symbol of hope for species facing extinction and a source of terror for ancient threats that had grown comfortable with predictable enemies. Years passed. Human crews saved dying worlds, defeated impossible enemies, and solved problems that had puzzled galactic civilization for centuries. They did it with mining equipment and cargo ships, with medical supplies turned into weapons and garbage, transformed into tactical advantages. They did it because when desperate aliens begged for help, humans couldn't say no. The quarantine was over. Humanity had found its place in the galaxy as the species that turned impossible into inevitable, one crazy plan at a time. And across the stars, whenever darkness threatened to consume the light, someone would send out a simple message. "Call the humans, they'll think of something. They always did."